Live from London, this is BBC News. New threats from Hezbollah's deputy chief, who warns they have a right to attack anywhere in Israel, since Israel has attacked anywhere in Lebanon. The UN says the situation in northern Gaza is desperate as it delivers the first food aid allowed into the area in more than 2 weeks. We'll talk live to the World Food Programme about the situation in Gaza and Lebanon. 3 weeks till the US election, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump hold rallies in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. We'll hear from a leading US pollster. The British government plans to give obese, unemployed people weight loss jabs to help them return to work.
Well, it's extraordinary. I've reacted to it as many ways as you could possibly react to it. It's wonderful.
And we speak to the godfather of Hollywood, Al Pacino, as he looks back on his career and becoming a father for the fourth time at the age of 84. Hello and welcome to today's Verified Live. We start in the Middle East, where tensions have ratcheted up again today, with new threats from Hezbollah's deputy chief, who said since Israel has attacked anywhere in Lebanon, we have the right to attack anywhere in Israel. Well, in Lebanon, UNICEF says more than 400,000 children have been displaced, 90% in the past 3 weeks, as Israel continues its offensive against the Iran-backed group Hezbollah. And in the last few hours, we've heard from the Pentagon saying that an advanced team of military personnel and the initial components of an American missile defense system have arrived in Israel, with more to be sent in the coming days. Meanwhile, a Washington Post report suggests Benjamin Netanyahu has told President Biden Israel will not hit oil or nuclear sites in Iran, but would target military facilities instead. That in retaliation to Tehran's attack on Israel 2 weeks ago. Well, earlier on the programme, I spoke to our correspondents Jonathan Head in Beirut, Tom Bateman in Washington, and Wira Davis in Jerusalem.
Well, I think the speech by Sheikh Naim Qassem, he's the public face of Hezbollah now after the death of Hassan Nasrallah last month, was probably more directed towards the Lebanese population than perhaps to the Israelis. I don't think he seriously expects Israelis to be influenced by the threats he made. But there was a plea for unity and patience to the Lebanese people. Remember, large numbers of the Lebanese do not support Hezbollah. Even in normal times, many are very frustrated and upset the way their country has been dragged into this conflict. They blame Hezbollah and Israel, and this was a plea by him for unity, saying we are the defenders of this country against Israel, warning Lebanese that he said if we get defeated and destroyed as Israel wants to, then Israel will be free to remake Lebanon and the wider Middle East as it wishes. He also promised to rebuild homes that were destroyed, that they would get that support. There was an interesting reference to Gaza. He said that the issues of Palestine and Lebanon could not be separated, which very much puts to bed the idea that perhaps Hezbollah might strike a separate peace with Israel, given the numbers of leaders it's lost. He very much put those together. Remember, Hezbollah entered this conflict in solidarity with Hamas. He said that solidarity still stands. That's a very defiant message from Hezbollah. The fight goes on. We're getting increasing numbers of airstrikes from the Israeli Air Force. Pretty much every day, 200 yesterday, lots of reports coming in today, and all of those airstrikes are displacing more and more and more people. And I think it's this tremendous humanitarian pressure, this wave of displaced people that is pushing UN agencies now to call for help, call for more assistance. UNICEF saying that 400,000 children have been displaced. That's a staggering number. That 1.2 million have lost access to education in a country whose population is only just over 5 million.
Jonathan, thanks very much. Let's go to Washington and to Tom Bateman. Tom, the Pentagon have been giving new details about that deployment. Just take me through what they've been saying.
Well, what they have now begun to send to Israel is a THAAD anti-ballistic missile system. This is a very high-power, much sought-after US-built aerial defense system, and is basically a series of truck-mounted missiles that are fired and can reach into and beyond the Earth's atmosphere to shoot down ballistic missiles. Now, it began to be reported over the last week that the Americans were going to send this to the Israelis in the aftermath of the Iranian missile attack on Israel on the 1st of October. Now, the vast majority of those missiles were shot down both by the Israelis and the Americans, with some support as well from European and Arab countries, but some did get through. One man was killed in that attack in the city of Jericho in the occupied West Bank, and there was also some significant damage, particularly around an Israeli Air Force base in the south of the country, a crater that came from an impact close to the headquarters of Mossad in the center of Israel. So it seems pretty clear that the Americans think that the Israeli aerial defenses need bolstering, and all of this in the context of the fact that the Israelis have still yet to respond to that Iranian missile strike, with a lot of pressure having come from the White House not to attack Iranian nuclear facilities or energy infrastructure. But the Israelis have been making, noises about that this will be a surprise attack, according to the defense minister, and that the Iranians won't know what hit them. So that's still to come. And of course, if there is an Iranian retaliation to that on Israel, this feels like the Americans trying to get the Israelis better prepared for that.
Tom, thanks very much. Let's go straight to Jerusalem and talk to Wira Davis, who's there for us. And Wira, what is Benjamin Netanyahu and the government saying about that Washington Post report that the administration has been told in America that they will only target military infrastructure and military targets, so not oil fields, not nuclear sites?
Well, of course, Israel finds itself fighting a conflict on many fronts, as we've heard in Lebanon, and I'm sure, as we'll hear from Rushdie, also in Gaza. But it's the impending possibility, the impending escalation of that conflict with Iran that I think is exercising a lot of minds now. And to be honest, nobody knows when or where Israel is going to hit Iran, as it has promised to do, perhaps apart from people inside Israel's war cabinet. It's been expected for several days now. We know that Joe Biden doesn't want Israel to target Iran's nuclear sites because of the possibility and the probability that could escalate things regionally. The danger, of course, with hitting Iran's petrochemical sites is that could upset the world economic market at a time when the American economy is subject of those elections in the States in less than a month's time. So Israel's options perhaps might be limited, but Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that it is up to Israel, and Israel will decide how, when and where it will respond against Iran. But it's pretty clear that given the deployment of these high-range anti-missile systems, high-altitude anti-missile systems in Israel with American personnel on the ground, that is a significant feature of this deployment. It is expected. We don't know when it will happen. We don't know which targets will be attacked, but it's the one thing that's exercising a lot of minds in Israel at the minute.
The latest from our correspondents. Let's speak to our Gaza correspondent now, Rushdie Abu-Alouf, who's in Istanbul. And Rushdie, the UN describing the situation in northern Gaza as desperate. Tell me more, because for almost all of October, no aid has got into northern Gaza, has it?
Yeah, well, in fact, there is very little shipment of aid arrived yesterday into northern Gaza. Not enough, according to many people that I managed to speak to in northern Gaza, where we believe 200, 300,000 people are stuck in this densely populated, halfly demolished refugee camp. And they believe that the aid that is coming is very little comparing to the demand since October the 1st. No fuel, no medicine, no food were allowed into northern Gaza. Well, when I did ask the people why you are not leaving the camp to the south as the Israelis are asking you to do, they said no place is safe. And they said they hit Al-Aqsa hospital yesterday, and they hit a school in the south yesterday. So they want us to go to the place where they target every day. Well, they do live in a very difficult situation, and they believe that this time is really different, because what the Israelis are doing in the north is dividing the place into 2-3 blocks and imposing a very tight blockade around this area. Movement in and around is really hard. Very little videos and posts shared by people inside, because the internet is really hard, show how catastrophic the situation is, even for those medical staff and ambulance drivers one of the ambulance drivers shared a video of a Israeli airstrike very close to the place where he was trying to go and risk a family that is under a collapsed building in Jabalia refugee camp. So situation remains very tense in the north.
Rushdie, thanks very much. Rushdie Abu Alouf there in Istanbul for us monitoring the situation. Let's speak now live to Matthew Hollingworth, who's served as World Food Programme Palestine Country Director in Gaza until recently, is now currently Country Director in Lebanon. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Let's start with the situation in Lebanon. How grave is it now?
I mean, clearly, in just 3 weeks, having a quarter of a population, 1.2, almost 1.3 million people displaced, dispossessed, moved from one area of the country and now seeking shelter wherever they can in other areas that they hope will remain safe, is a problem that no country would easily be able to respond to. We are seeing families that are, desperately in need of all sorts of assistance: water, sanitation, hygiene, health, shelter, food, because they've left everything behind. They've left their lives behind, their jobs behind, their homes behind, and they have very little in terms of their own finances and resilience to cover their own needs. So this is a massive emergency, a massive need for such a large population, and it's only happened in a matter of weeks.
Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, you've had long experience in Gaza over the last 12 months. How similar does it feel with evacuation orders, people moving, people not knowing where is safe?
I mean, the similarity is the fear and the trauma amongst the people that we are serving. They have obviously all been watching, reading, listening to what's been happening in Gaza over the year, and now it's happened to them. And they are all terribly frightened, children traumatized. I mean, 400,000 kids homeless today, looking for or desperately in need of support with their families. It's atrocious. It's frightening for us to respond to as well. So there are those similarities and those evictions, and we're seeing breaches in international humanitarian law. We're seeing, civilian areas being struck, and it really is of great concern to us all. And like we have said, week in, week out in Gaza for more than a year now, what we need is de-escalation. We need the peacemakers to work on finding a solution, hostages to be released, and fighting to stop. There is no warring, conflict-based solution to this crisis, and we are all fearful now of it taking a regional direction.
We were just hearing from our correspondent the latest about the situation in northern Gaza. I've lost count, and I'm sure you have, the amount of times Western politicians have urged Israel to allow more aid in, to allow more food in. It must rank of hundreds or thousands of times. What is your assessment then when you hear pleas yet again to allow aid to get in? Is aid, do you think, is food being used as a weapon of war here?
I mean, clearly we have simply not had the access and space to do our work over the last month plus. Not enough has been going in to the southern areas of Gaza, and nothing has been going into the north. We've just had this small breakthrough where we've had, I think 12 truckloads go in with a truck of fuel as well. But it's just not enough. It's not going to change the lives of everybody. It's too little. We need consistent deliveries every single day, because people in those areas today are 100% dependent.
Sure, but and apologies to interrupt you, what you've just said has been said again and again and again and again.
And frankly, that's our role. We need to keep on saying it again and again and again, because it's true. We are the voice of those people that can't shout loud enough to be heard beyond Gaza, and we need to be pressing for that to change. People are suffering. These are people who are suffering daily, and we've got to get something through to them. And we need to have a complete change in the understanding of what's happening there, because people are suffering, and it's gone on far too long.
Matthew Hollingworth, thank you for joining us here on the programme. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. You're watching BBC News. Let's turn to the US. 3 weeks out from the presidential election, to the latest rallies in just a moment. But I just want to show you a quick look at the latest polling, because this is the national poll tracker. Kamala Harris appears to be 3 points ahead at 49%. That's the national picture, though. In the battleground states, Kamala Harris is ahead in 4 of those states, Donald Trump in 3. They're all well within the margin of error, so it's going to be obviously very tight. Well, Donald Trump spoke at a town hall event in Oaks, where he promised to increase oil drilling to drive down energy costs. His remarks were twice interrupted by medical emergencies in the crowd. He blamed a lack of air conditioning, curtailed questions, and then called for music to be played.
Piece of paper anywhere in the world. I sleep with it every night. I kiss it. I kiss it. And you see those numbers, by the way, for those that we talked about, you know, the border, when you're talking about the border, look at the numbers. That's right. They don't want to give us air conditioning. It's too expensive. It costs too much. Anyway, but they're both okay.
Yes.
They're both in good shape.
And that's wonderful.
Would anybody else like to faint? Please raise your hand.
Let's do it now.
Please raise your hand. You know what we could do, though? If my guys can do it, how about we'll do a little music. Let's make this a musical fest. Oh, looky, looky. So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Here we go, everybody.
Well, that's just a little of yesterday's rally in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump, Kamala Harris also in Pennsylvania. Well, John Zogby is a US pollster and author of Beyond the Horse Race, How to Read Polls and Why We Should. I started by asking him about what we just seen and whether Donald Trump's cognitive ability, some of the ramblings we've seen in recent rallies, is now being discussed in the polls.
Well, it's not showing up in the polls. In fact, if anything, if we want to call it gains, I suppose we can call it that. Kamala Harris had a slightly larger lead of 3 or 4 points. It's now down to 1 or 2 points. Trump is doing he's very competitive in the battleground states. This is the sort of thing that opponents to Donald Trump find bizarre and as Ms. Harris said, unhinged. On the other hand, it does not appear to be hurting him at all among his supporters or potential supporters, at least not yet. And, this is Donald Trump. This is how he is, and it's working.
So it's already factored in, you would say. You talked about Kamala Harris's lead shrinking from the time of the nomination and post-TV debate. Why has it shrunk? Can you pinpoint some of the reasons in the polling?
Now, remember, we're getting really granular here. We're not only well within the margin of error, but we're on either side of a tie, slightly, ever so slightly. But, the honeymoon has worn off. For those who are still undecided, maybe don't like either candidate, they're demanding, and we're hearing that they're demanding more specifics from Kamala Harris. And they say that she's not providing it, that she's trying to, run out the clock and hope that she doesn't make any big mistakes. I think the other factor as well is that she is having a difficult time determining just what the relationship with Joe Biden is. He's not popular, and she has decided to stay loyal. And you can understand why she would, and to say she was part of the decisions that were made in that joint administration.
Yes, and how important how important is the black vote, the Latino vote, going to be? We saw Barack Obama only a few days ago out trying to reinforce the message. How important is that sector of the vote, or those sectors?
They're losing support among young black men. And that's why you saw that plan yesterday. And working class Latinos. Donald Trump is overperforming among those two groups. And in order for Democrats to win, they've got to build back that Obama winning coalition that included 2/3 support or thereabouts among Latino voters and 85 to 90% support of blacks, and they're not there yet.
Yep. Let me ask you a final question, because I was reading one analysis only yesterday that suggested that for Donald Trump, he maxes out at around 46-47%. And so if Kamala Harris can get her vote out, she wins. Do you buy that sort of analysis? And how important these final 3 weeks is money, finance going to be?
Well, I used to buy that argument that he maxes out at 46% until mine and other polls are showing him at 47, 48, and 49%. So I think we got to nix that one. Money is very important. And at this point in time, going after a narrow group of undecideds, and if you can't energize them to come out and vote for you, then at the very least, what you can do is suppress the vote for the other guy. And so you're going to see a lot more negative campaigning.
John Sogby talking to me a little earlier. Now, South Korea's military says it has fired warning shots after North Korea blew up sections of road connecting the two countries. There's been heightened tensions between the North and the South. Pyongyang had vowed to cut off the roads and railways, once seen as symbols of cooperation between the two countries. Now, Ukraine says it shot down 12 attack drones launched by Russia overnight, but such interceptions are an almost nightly occurrence, 1,000 days into Russia's full-scale invasion. Well, across the country, Ukraine's Air Force relies on volunteers to help protect the skies, and with many men being called up to the front lines, more women are actually stepping in. Our Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford joined one patrol who call themselves the Witches of Bucha.
The buzz of danger over Kiev. Russia's attack drones arrive here almost nightly now, forcing Ukraine's air defences into this deadly game of search and destroy. So outside the city, they're supported by volunteer teams. We followed one in a recent air raid as they rushed to help protect the skies. They call themselves the Witches of Bucha, because, apart from him, they're women, stepping in as ever more men are sent to the front line. A vet and a manicurist, helping assemble a machine gun that's more than 8 decades old. It's ancient, but effective. The team say it's downed 3 drones so far.
Неізвісно, як поведе себе шахет. Він може спікірувати на світло. Якщо так, він може.
So Valentina's saying that the drones could see the light and could respond to that. They don't know how the drones are going to behave. So they're saying we need to work in the dark, essentially. On her tablet, Yulia spots 2 drones in the air. But not close yet.
Of course, it's nervous work, because we need to be focused to react to the slightest sound.
This is how the Bucha witches now spend their weekends. Lesson 1 on storming a building. Not perfected yet, but these skills are empowering for women who lived through the Russian takeover of their region and were terrified.
Я пам'ятаю, як ми були в окупації.
I remember how we were under occupation.
Жах.
I remember all that horror.
Пам'ятаю крики своєї дитини.
I remember the screams of my own child. I remember the dead people when we were fleeing. That's where I find the strength to go on.
They combine doing all this with their day jobs. A maths teacher and an office manager, tired of feeling helpless.
You cry and suffer for the people who are no longer here, those taken by this stupid war. Then they were recruiting women here, and I tried it and didn't fall apart.
This full-scale war will soon be 1,000 days old, and Valentina's life has been transformed. But the women here refuse to give up believing in victory, and in their role, trying to bring that about. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, near Bucha.
More on all of our stories coming up. Next up, though, it is time for the business news.
Hello. After the chill of the weekend and even the frost of this morning in northern Scotland, the rest of the week is looking pretty mild. That warmer air coming all the way up from Spain, Portugal and the Mediterranean on southerly winds. However, if you think warm means necessarily dry and sunny, you will be mistaken, because it's low pressure which is inducing that southerly wind, and it's that which will be pushing outbreaks of rain across the country during the next couple of days. Out there today, most are still dry, but we'll see some heavier rain develop towards the southwest, southwest Wales and Northern Ireland later in the day. Some heavy and thundery downpours, strong winds in the west as well, touching gale force. If you get a break in the cloud elsewhere, you're doing well. This evening, temperatures around 14 to 16 for many. Still a bit cooler in northern Scotland, but here's where the clearest of the skies will be into tonight. But we're going to see more rain develop across western areas in particular through the night, spreading its way northwards and eastwards, some of which will be heavy and thundery in places. But with that southerly wind, lots of cloud, outbreaks of rain, it isn't going to be a cold night by any means, around 11 to 14 or 15 degrees as we start Wednesday morning. Best of the brighter breaks for Wednesday though, East Anglia in the southeast, lots of cloud elsewhere. Northern half of the country going to see rain on and off. Again, some heavier downpours, even the odd rumble of thunder. And then later on, we'll see some longer spells of heavy, potentially thundery rain, southwest England and also across Wales. There could be some minor flooding problems here and in Northern Ireland. Temperatures though, even with the cloud, around 14 to 17, tempered by the breeze. Maybe up to around 20 to 22 East Anglia and the southeast. But even here into the evening, we'll start to see some rain push in. Weather fronts working eastwards across the country. Could be quite a wet night for some, in fact, to take us into the start of Thursday. A lot of cloud to begin with. Some mist and fog around as well, particularly on the hills in Scotland, Northern Ireland. But most of that will break up. Sunny spells for most of us on Thursday. Much brighter day. A few showers dotted around, particularly in the west. And temperatures, even though the air is a little bit fresher than that today, with more sunshine around, probably feel a bit more pleasant. 16 to 19 or 20 Celsius possible. As we go into Friday, we start off with some brighter breaks, some mist and fog around, but cloud increases from the west through the day. The wind picks up, touching gale force in places, and outbreaks of rain will develop, but bring in as well some pretty rough seas to the south and the west. Staying on the mild side, but that heavy rain will push eastwards through Friday night. Take care.
We're going to start with what's happening when it comes to climate change.
We cannot normalize this.
This is going to appeal to more people than just his base.
And that's really the nub of this. The hard part comes next.
That gift of panda diplomacy.
But this is the first time we've done this in modern history.
And we're going to say unprecedented a lot.
The news is just words without the context.
And this is the context.
Tonight from 8 on BBC News and iPlayer.
Ukraine is just about holding the front here while the Russians have launched this fresh assault.
Everywhere you look, there are uprooted trees, there are bits of building, and the destruction is just in every direction.
Incendiary drones were dropped here. We know this was the military junta because the rebels don't have that kind of weaponry.
When you can hear the tear gas canisters being lobbed at the protesters.
There when the story breaks. BBC News. Follow on the app.
Ready for a lively debate? Sometimes our panellists agree, and sometimes they don't. There's people with a lot to say, and others who just say enough. Some who want to ask the hard questions, some who want to avoid them, and some who think they have the answers. They're guaranteed to keep you entertained, whether you agree or not. Politics Live, tomorrow at 11:15 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
High pressure at Boeing. The troubled plane maker looks to raise as much as $25 billion as the costs of strikes continues to soar. It's a beat for the big banks. Results from a trio of Wall Street behemoths tops forecasts. And slamming on the brakes, the boss of BMW tells the Paris Auto Show that Europe should cancel its planned ban on petrol and diesel cars. Hello there, welcome to Business Today. I'm Ty Genwright. Well, we've had another sign of the financial strains facing the troubled US plane maker Boeing. It's filed paperwork with the US financial regulator that would allow it to raise as much as $25 billion through new share sales and debt. Well, ongoing strikes at Boeing's main factory in Seattle are thought to be costing it around $100 million a day. They're now in their fifth week. Those workers are due to hold a large rally in Seattle in a few hours' time to try to increase the pressure on Boeing to improve their pay offer. Well, our North America business correspondent Ritika Gupta is following this story from New York for us. And Ritika, will this new capital, do you think, help Boeing's bargaining position with those striking workers?
Well, this added firepower should, in theory, help to improve its bargaining position with the workers. As you mentioned, it's seeking to raise new capital up to $25 billion in a stock and bond offering. This is as it tries to shore up its troubled finances, shore up its balance sheet, boost its access to cash. This is as it tries to avoid getting cut to junk status by bond graders, which would make its cost of borrowing extremely high. They've also agreed to a $10 billion credit agreement separately. So that should boost its access to some short-term liquidity for them. But it seems like Boeing is, trying its best to navigate the strikes, but it also has upcoming debt maturities to pay. Type.
Indeed. And those striking workers are going to hold a rally in Seattle, that's Boeing's hometown today, a day after the acting Labour Secretary from the US government, from the White House, visited to try and broker a deal. Are they any closer to an agreement, do you think?
Well, Tag, we haven't really seen too much progress when it comes to the negotiations. Boeing withdrew its latest offer last week. It seems to be this blame game with both sides accusing each other of unfair labour practices during the negotiations. And as you mentioned, the workers will be holding a rally in Seattle today. That's just a day after the acting Labour Secretary flew over to Seattle to meet with both sides in a bid to try and break that deadlock. But it's, these workers have been striking since September the 13th. And they're still seeking better wages, a better wage deal, and all the while halting the production of some of those key Boeing jets. So it remains very heated, Tyke.
OK, Ritika Gupta in New York, thank you for that. Well, we're staying in the US now because the big banks are often seen as a sign of how well the US economy is doing. But it was a mixed picture from the three big names that gave us their latest results in the last few hours. Goldman Sachs saw its profits increase in the July to September period compared to the same time a year ago. This as a result of more deal-making and fundraising from companies. Investment banking was also a bright spot for Bank of America and Citigroup, but their profits fell as retail banking saw more bad credit card debts and increased competition for customers. Well, Brendan Brown, Financial Institutions Managing Director at S&P Global Ratings, gave us his take on the results.
All three of these banks reported earnings roughly within our expectations. As you said, investment banking was a positive story, and it continues to rebound after a fairly weak 2023. We saw a big pickup in debt underwriting, both in investment grade debt as well as leveraged finance. And equity underwriting also was much stronger than last year. There's been some pickup in IPOs as well as secondary offerings. And we're seeing a little bit of improvement in mergers and acquisitions, although there's still plenty of room to run there. and that drove those investment banking results. We also saw strong trading activity on the equity side, although much more mixed on the fixed income side. So all three of those banks benefited from those trends. But since Goldman is most focused on investment banking, they saw the biggest boost in earnings compared to last year.
The chief executive of BMW says that the European Union should cancel its planned 2035 ban on petrol and diesel cars if it wants to reduce its reliance on China. Oliver Zipse was speaking at the Paris Auto Show, where Chinese car makers have been making a bigger splash than ever before. The BMW boss said it was no longer realistic to ban new petrol and diesel cars in 2035, that the ban could lead to a massive shrinking of the car industry in Europe. Well, car makers have been ploughing huge sums into developing electric cars, but EV sales have been falling and the competition for the Chinese is intense. Our business correspondent Theo Leggett is at the Paris Auto Show and has been speaking with the chief executive of the Renault Group.
What makes me optimistic is that Renault had to kind of ask itself the right question 3 or 4 years ago when we were in trouble. And right now this thing is giving us an advantage also because some of the cars that we decided 3 or 4 years ago are coming to the market. Many electric cars, many hybrid cars, a lot of technology. So we try to be kind of anti-cyclical and try to, beat those kind of negative trends.
Now, if you're wandering around the show, you'll see that there's a large number of Chinese brands here. Yeah. They're expanding onto the European market quite aggressively, onto your turf. How much of a threat is that to you?
I think, I'm old enough to have seen Japanese coming into Europe, of course American before in the 50s, 60s, and then Japanese in the 80s and 90s, and then the Koreans coming in. You sum up Americans, Japanese and Koreans that are here since decades, they actually, their market share is probably at 25%, not 95%. So we're still there, alive and kicking. We have been expanding in other markets in the world. So it's going to be the same with the Chinese. Of course, right now, one of the challenges we have is the Chinese started on the EV side earlier than us. So we have to catch up, 2 generations in one. But don't underestimate the ability of, European traditional OEM to find the right measures of the challenge.
But do you need help to do that? Because the European Union clearly thinks you do. They've introduced tariffs on imports of Chinese EVs, supported by your own government. Do you think that's a necessary move?
This is almost a kind of a legal issue, and it's not a business issue or a trade issue. I mean, there are rules of the games that have been signed by everybody on the WTO, and the watchdogs from the European community, they have actually certified that some companies didn't play the rules, and that's why we didn't do like the Americans where you have like 100% on anything that's, is Chinese, but it's just like focused on some companies, right? And so I have nothing to say on that. It's like you don't discuss a judgment of the Supreme Court. So the real question is, are we able to catch up on those value chains that are today controlled by Chinese, operators from upstream to downstream? Can we be competitive in 5 years? Okay, so that's the real question.
Okay, so let me ask you that question. Can you make cars, electric cars, as cheaply and as efficiently as the Chinese? Because that's what we're talking about here.
So it's possible. We just have to, react, and we're doing it at Renault. And we need to be creative, and we need to be competitive. And this is the focus of our action.
Luca De Meo there from Renault Group. Well, back here in the UK, the latest data on wage growth has raised expectations of further cuts to the cost of borrowing this year. Average wages, excluding bonuses, grew at an annual pace of 4.9% between June and August, falling below 5% for the first time since 2022. Kathleen Brooks is Research Director at XTB.
There's a slightly increase in the chance of a cut next month in November, but that was pretty much priced in already, because we have seen that big drop in inflation, and we're expected to see inflation tomorrow fall below the Bank of England's target at 2%. However, I think the drop in wage growth is very symbolic. It also shows that disinflation trend is persisting. But I think you make a good point there, because it's not all bad news for consumers and for us with our money in our wallets, because real pay growth growth is actually still holding up pretty well.
Some out there are actually forecasting the Bank of England could cut rates twice this year, another 2 times this year, November and December. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's still a little bit rich at the moment. I think when that will be solidified is how bad did growth do in Q3? And that's when we'll see bets really start to ramp up about a December rate cut. But I definitely think that the market is underpricing the chance of Bank of England cuts. Over the next year, there's about 4.5 cuts priced in. That compares to 6 in the US and 6 in the Eurozone. And I think if we see Q3 growth potentially tip into negative territory, that's going to be when we're going to see the bets on further rate cuts and more rate cuts actually start to ramp up.
In other business today, the IMF has forecast that global public debt will exceed $100 trillion by the end of this year. Government debt, which ballooned during the COVID-19 pandemic, has continued to rise as countries embrace higher spending to stimulate economic growth. The US and China are driving the surge. Netflix is expected to report its slowest subscriber additions in 6 quarters on Thursday, as gains the company made from a password-sharing crackdown start to ease. New data from analysts at Nielsen says the streaming giant likely added 4 million subscribers in the July to September period. As the pace of sign-ups slows, Netflix is trying to shift investor attention towards other performance measures, including revenue growth and margins. And city officials in the Czech capital, Prague, have announced a ban on organised all-night pub crawls, citing complaints about rowdy drinkers and unacceptable noise. The alcohol-fuelled bar hopping is often organised by travel agencies, but councillors say they want to attract wealthier and more cultured visitors to the city. Prague's been a very popular destination for cheap beers and cheap prices for quite a long time. Finally, let's go to China, where a change in habits is proving for good news for the coffee industry. Traditionally a tea-drinking giant, more and more people in China are turning to cappuccino or an espresso for their caffeine fix, and business is booming. Coffee shops are springing up all over China now, overtaking the US as the branded coffee capital of the world. Nathaniel Lim is a beverage expert from the data analytics firm Euromonitor International.
I think in China, like what you said, people are turning towards coffee because people are more educated about coffee consumption, and they are also having a higher disposable income. So that's why there's more people drinking coffee. But we also have to recognize that there has been a rise and emergence of local coffee shops like Luckin and Coty Coffee. In fact, we do see the number of coffee shops and tea shops increasing by 72% in 2023. There's a lot of price competition going on. We do see, price offerings. We do see innovative flavors coming on. International players are also forced to actually offer price discounts or even coupons to actually attract price-conscious consumers here, alongside, with innovative flavors that appeal to the local consumers.
That's your business today. I'm Ty Genrice. Stay with us here on BBC News.
Witness the magic when experience meets raw talent.
There has to be a moment where I can say, wow, this is beautiful. It's about song.
Renowned icons with emerging artists on a unique learning journey.
If you do it with conviction.
Yeah. So take that further.
From mentor to protege.
Everything what I tell her is doing right away. Why do you do that? That's great.
Watch a legacy unfold.
They really are here to help us.
Arts in Motion. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Join Sumi, Catty and Katrina as they cut through the noise and distraction of the US election.
It feels like we're in the home stretch now.
With precision.
The US carries such weight on the global stage.
Independence.
On the economy, on crime, on immigration.
And no agenda.
It's the first time that I've been using words like friendly, cordial, amicable in a very long time in US politics.
We're at that stage of the campaign where they're really kind of slicing and dicing the electorate.
Path to the presidency. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
You're watching BBC News. Now, Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, is in lockdown as a major summit involving Russia, China, Iran and India begins. Well, ahead of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, the Chinese premier arrived for the first visit by the Chinese premier to Pakistan in 11 years. The threat alert has been high in the country ahead of this summit, especially after 2 Chinese nationals were killed last week in a militant attack near Karachi airport. Well, our Pakistan correspondent in Islamabad is Caroline Davies, and she said security is absolutely paramount.
Delegates have started arriving here in Islamabad for the start of the SCO summit. We're here in Pakistan's media centre that's been set up for the SCO summit. Now, Pakistan is very keen that this all goes smoothly, and at the top of everybody's minds is security. Bear in mind, it is just over a week since 2 Chinese nationals were killed in a militant attack just outside Karachi airport. Now, given that, we've also had reassurances from the Pakistan authorities. They've said that there are 10,000 security personnel that are deployed to try to make sure the city is safe. We know that schools and colleges have been told to close for the duration of the SCO, and a large amount of the roads here in the capital have also been blocked off entirely while this summit is going on. Now, in terms of what's going to be discussed, we know that there'll be discussions about security, energy security, food security, the environment. But in terms of announcements, bear in mind the countries that are attending. Not all of them have got good relationships. Think about Pakistan and India, China and India. It might be difficult to see big announcements being made across the board from everyone who is attending here. But given the people who are attending there, and given the geopolitical situation that is currently incredibly fragile, there will be a lot of interest in what many of the big players who are attending will say.
Now let's return to that interview we promised you a little while ago, because one of the biggest film stars of all time, Al Pacino, has been delivering larger-than-life performances since the 1970s. Well, now at the age of 84, after becoming a father for the 4th time last year, he's written his first ever autobiography. Our entertainment reporter Colin Patterson has been to meet him.
You're my older brother, and I love you.
The Godfather made Al Pacino a star.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Say hello to my little friend! With Scarface, he created a cult hero.
Sir, you're out of order.
Out of order? I show you out of order! And playing a blind veteran in Scent of a Woman finally won him his Oscar after 8 nominations.
Now, for the first time, Al Pacino has written down his own story, from growing up in New York to the present day here in Los Angeles, where he's lived for a quarter of a century to be near his children. And last year, he became a dad again.
Great meeting you. Great meeting you.
We met up with them near where he lives in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I'm just going to tie my shoelaces.
Al Pacino.
Yes.
The autobiography deals a lot with family and fatherhood, obviously. And you became a father again last year. How have you reacted to that?
Well, it's extraordinary. I've reacted to it as many ways as you could possibly react to it. It's wonderful. You know, I have this little person. Everything he does is interesting to me, you know. So we talk. I play the harmonica with him. And we have made this kind of contact, so it's fun.
At 83, did you have any reservations about the age?
Well, yeah, I'd want to be around for this child. Of course I did. But things happen. And I hope I am. I hope I stay healthy. And he know who his dad is.
However, Al Pacino had a near-death experience in 2020 when he fell ill during the pandemic.
When I opened my eyes, there were 5 paramedics in my living room. There were 2 doctors who looked like spacemen. And there was an ambulance in front of my house. There was something, then there was nothing. No fall, no anything. There was just nothing, which was, in retrospect, was sort of frightening.
There was no white tunnels?
No white tunnels, no, nothing. It's like Shakespeare says, in To Be or Not to Be, no more.
No sequel?
No sequel, no, exactly.
Let's talk about The Godfather.
Yes, finally.
This wasn't enough time, Michael. Wasn't enough time. We'll get there, Pop.
I was in it. How did that happen? I was lucky because Francis Coppola saw me on stage.
But once you were in the role of the Godfather, they wanted rid of you. How close did you come to being sacked?
When your director talks to you and says, you know, I had a lot of faith in you, man, what's happening? You're not delivering. They wanted a leading man in that role, someone who was, took the reins.
But Pacino was saved when the next day they filmed what would become one of The Godfather's most famous scenes.
This is the gun in the toilets of the restaurant scene.
They say that Francis moved that scene up. He claims he didn't. It seems like that would be the thing to do, get to the meat, because that's what the studio wants to see. And they liked the scene, and that was it.
Who are they going to replace you with, do you think? Could you see anyone lurking around?
Bob De Niro comes to mind.
We went looking for your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Oh, I don't have a star.
You don't have a star? How can you possibly not?
I don't know. It happens. There are a lot of people who have, but there's also a lot of people who don't have a star.
If Hollywood's committee are watching this interview, would you be quite up for one now?
Of course.
There we go.
Yeah, sure.
Come on, Al Pacino wants his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Fascinating interview, and just the pointer, because an hour-long version of that interview will be shown on BBC Two on Friday the 25th of October at 9 p.m. for viewers here in the UK. You're watching BBC News. Now, we have the countdown to the budget in a couple of weeks. The UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has today declined to rule out that the government could increase employer national insurance in the budget on the 30th of October. Well, what would that mean, and would it break a Labour manifesto pledge? Well, Ben Chu from BBC Verify has been taking a look.
Speculation that in the 30th of October budget, Rachel Reeves might be about to impose additional national insurance costs on employers. Firms currently pay this tax on the salaries they pay to workers, but they don't have to pay it on the money they put into people's pensions. And the speculation is that that might change. Here's what Labour's 2024 manifesto said in this area. We will not increase national insurance, and Labour will not increase taxes on working people. So would this national insurance hike, if it happened, break that pledge? Ministers have suggested in recent days that there's a distinction between the national insurance that falls on employees and that paid to employers. And that's true in terms of the direct impact. Employee national insurance comes off your monthly payslip. Employer national insurance does not. It's paid directly from the company to the government. But the indirect impact of national insurance is a different matter. Economists who have carefully studied the indirect impact of employer national insurance judge that most of it in the end falls not on the company and its shareholders, but the employees, in the form of lower wages than would otherwise have been paid and less hiring than would otherwise have happened. So in this sense, it would be a tax on working people. That's why many have described employer national insurance as a tax on jobs. It's estimated that imposing full national insurance on employers' pension contributions could raise around £9 billion a year. So it's easy to understand why Rachel Reeves, who says she has £17 billion a year of spending pressures to meet to balance the books, is examining it. But some public finance experts are warning the Chancellor that raising more money from employer national insurance complicates and distorts the tax system and the jobs market, and in a way that risks holding back growth.
Ben Chu. Now, a jury has been told that neighbours heard shockingly loud sounds of smacking, followed by gut-wrenching screams coming from a home of 10-year-old Sara Sharif, who was found dead in August of last year. The Old Bailey heard that Sara wore a hijab to hide facial injuries she received in the lead-up to her death. Her body was found at her family's house in Surrey. Yesterday, the court heard that her father, Irfan Sharif, seen here on the left, called police from Pakistan and admitted to killing her. Mr. Sharif, his partner, who you can see in the middle, and Sara's uncle on the right have all pleaded not guilty to her murder. Let's go straight to our correspondent Helena Wilkinson, who's there at the Old Bailey for us. And Helena, tell us what the court has heard today.
Yes, Matthew, the prosecution continued opening the case to the jury. As you mentioned there, they heard that Sara wore a hijab to hide facial injuries that she received in the months before she died. The jury heard she died in August of last year. A neighbour, the jury heard, found it unusual that Sara was the only member of her large extended family that lived at the address to be dressed in a hijab. And the prosecutor, Bill Elman Jones Casey, said that the hijab was indicative of the need to conceal injuries to her face and head from the outside world. The jury also heard that Sara Sharif's school, staff at the school, noticed a number of bruises on the little girl in the months before she died, and that she was taken out of school by her father in April of 2023. He wanted to take her out, withdraw her from school to be homeschooled. The jury also heard accounts from neighbours. The prosecutor in his opening said that one neighbour heard 2 days before Sara's death a single high-pitched scream which lasted a couple of seconds and stopped suddenly. And a woman who lived at the previous address of the Sharif family also said that she heard shockingly loud sounds of smacking and gut-wrenching screams of young female children. The jury have previously been told here at the Old Bailey that Sara Sharif died from extensive injuries sustained over a prolonged period of time. Her father, Irfan Sharif, her stepmother, Beenish Batul, and her uncle, Faisal Malik, they all deny murder charges and they all deny causing or allowing the death of a child. The jury has been told to return back here to court at 10:30 tomorrow when the evidence will continue.
Helena, thanks very much. Well, as we come up to 5 o'clock, let me tell you what we have coming up here. We will be live in the Middle East, some important developments to bring you right up to date with. Antony Blinken has apparently written a letter to the Israeli government in the last 2 days, the strongest known warning from the Biden administration in terms of Israel's strategy in northern Gaza. So we'll have the latest from Washington, from Jerusalem and from Beirut here on the programme in the next little while. All of that after weather, and that's with Matt Taylor.
Hello. After the chill of the weekend and even the frost of this morning in northern Scotland, the rest of the week is looking pretty mild. That warmer air coming all the way up from Spain, Portugal and the Mediterranean on southerly winds. However, if you think warm means necessarily dry and sunny, you will be mistaken, because it's low pressure which is inducing that southerly wind, and it's that which will be pushing outbreaks of rain across the country during the next couple of days. Out there today, most are still dry, but we'll see some heavier rain develop towards the southwest, southwest Wales and Northern Ireland later in the day. Some heavy and thundery downpours, strong winds in the west as well, touching gale force. If you get a break in the cloud elsewhere, you're doing well. This evening, temperatures around 14 to 16 for many. Still a bit cooler in northern Scotland, but here's where the clearest of the skies will be into tonight. But we're going to see more rain develop across western areas in particular through the night, spreading its way northwards and eastwards, some of which will be heavy and thundery in places. But with that southerly wind, lots of cloud, outbreaks of rain, it isn't going to be a cold night by any means, around 11 to 14 or 15 degrees as we start Wednesday morning. Best of the brighter breaks for Wednesday though, East Anglia in the southeast, lots of cloud elsewhere. Northern half of the country, going to see rain on and off. Again, some heavier downpours, even the odd rumble of thunder. And then later on, we'll see some longer spells of heavy, potentially thundery rain, southwest England and also across Wales. There could be some minor flooding problems here and in Northern Ireland. Temperatures though, even with a cloud, around 14 to 17, tempered by the breeze. Maybe up to around 20 to 22 East Anglia and the southeast. But even here into the evening, we'll start to see some rain push in. Weather fronts working eastwards across the country. Could be quite a wet night for some, in fact, to take us into the start of Thursday. A lot of cloud to begin with. Some mist and fog around as well, particularly on the hills in Scotland, Northern Ireland. But most of that will break up. Sunny spells for most of us on Thursday. Much brighter day. A few showers dotted around, particularly in the west. And temperatures, even though the air is a little bit fresher than that today, with more sunshine around, probably feel a bit more pleasant. 16 to 19 or 20 Celsius possible. As we go into Friday, we start off with some brighter breaks, some mist and fog around, but cloud increases from the west through the day. The wind picks up, touching gale force in places, and outbreaks of rain will develop, but bring in as well some pretty rough seas to the south and the west. Staying on the mild side, but that heavy rain will push eastwards through Friday night. Take care.